Not enough pachami. We're on? All right. This will pick up some viewers. Okay. In today's Gemara class, we're going to be analyzing some of the sensations that surrounded the events at Sinai, Matan Torah. And the truth is that some of what we're going to learn about tonight seems almost impossible to understand. Not that it's impossible for God to do miracles. He can do whatever he wants. So what is the point? It's like, why are we learning about this? Why did it happen? What does it mean to us? How is it supposed to deepen our appreciation of the Torah? How is it supposed to make the upcoming holiday of Shavuos more special? Because we're learning this gemara. We want to be able to appreciate the phenomenon of Matan Torah. And on the surface, it will seem difficult. But I'm confident that when you finish understanding this gemara, you'll have a whole new perspective. Like a peek behind the scenes. So we are going to begin where we left off on page 88b. Probably in your version of the English translation, it's 88b2, I guess. Mm-hmm. Does that sound right? Mm-hmm. We finished talking in our last class about those who get shamed or embarrassed but do not return the favor. And now we are going to see some of the teachings of different sages, which, as you'll see, they're kind of all linked together. The obvious common denominator, they all speak about revelation at Sinai. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the eldest sage of the Talmud Yerushalmi. Sometimes Rabbi Yochanan is regarded as a Tana, as a rabbi from the times of the Mishnah, because he's just on the cusp, or the end of one era and on the cusp of the next era. So Rabbi Yochanan taught that if we analyze the verses that are found in the book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms, carefully, we will discover a new series of messages about Matan Torah. And that much of what David HaMelech speaks about, and in this particular psalm, it's actually pretty overt. He speaks about, he mentions Sinai, he's mentioned by name. This will give us a whole new appreciation and understanding of what happened. Mai dichsiv. What is the meaning of that which is written? This is found in the book of Tehillim. It's Psalm 68, I believe. It's verse 12. And it says the following. Where are we? Yes, I'm right. Psalm 68, verse 12. Hashem yitein oimer. Now, literally, yitein oimer means he gives speech. Why do he give speech? Why wouldn't he just speak? What does it mean to give speech? So the Mefarshim there explain yitein oimer means that he fulfills. The word yiten, which is connected to the idea of netina or matana, giving, like doing. He does what he says. It's like yitein oimer is a poetic way of saying he fulfills his word. He gives his word. He does what he says. So Rabbi Yochanan says, what is the meaning of Yitein Omer? Hamevasris, or Hamevasrot. Hamevasris or Mevasrot is plural. What's a besura? Besura is news. Message. A newsbreak, message. Sometimes it's information that heralds a new beginning. Sometimes there's big news. Sometimes there's fake news. Sometimes there's no news. Sometimes there's like something that heralds, a big announcement. And that big announcement is going to make a difference. So, mevasis, this is a besura. So, what is the meaning of Yitein Omer, that he'll fulfill his words? Hamevasreis tzavarav. Hamevasreis tzavarav means that he informed. Rashi says tzavarav means many legions. Literally, the word tzava means army, like tzva Haganah Yisrael. It's spelled the same way. Tzadik Vei's Aleph. But here, tzava is understood within the framework of the English word legion, which by the way is a military term also. Roman legion or The Jordanian legionnaires are two of the things that come to mind. But it was sometimes used in military terminology, but that's because armies always fight together in unison as a group. And the moment they break ranks, it's over. In the army, everything has to be coordinated. Otherwise, it's just friendly fire. So, when we talk about legions, we talk about groups, or organized groups. That's the nature of legions. They're organized groups. But sometimes we speak about legions not in military terminology, but we speak about like large groups or big, large swaths of people. So Rashi interprets the words tzava rav. Take a look in Rashi. He says kol ha'umot, all of the nations. So God will fulfill that which He spoke or that which He said, the besura, but was mevasrot, plural, the plural information, news break, I don't know, kind of like a heralding of some big announcement, which was given to Tzavarav, all the nations. What does that mean? First of all, thank you. Okay. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. From Zion, Torah will come forth. But when did God speak to all the nations? Let me ask you a better question. When did God speak to our nation? Once. Just once. Otherwise, who did He speak to? Prophets. Not just Moshe. Prophets. He's been speaking to people ever since when? Adam and Eve spoke to God. The patriarchs, the matriarchs, they certainly spoke to God. Noah speaks to God. Mesushelach, Methuselah, maybe he spoke to God. We don't know. There were people who spoke to God. We have a whole collection of prophets. Prophets we know of. Minor prophets, major prophets. You have prophets like Amos, Habakkuk. A short little book, a few chapters. Sometimes you have a book like Avadia, it's one chapter. And you have a book like Isaiah. A huge book. Jeremiah, major prophets. And there are lots of prophets, we don't know their names. Shmuel, Aleph, and Beis. Without prophets, we don't know who they were. There were thousands of prophets at some point. People that spoke to God. People that heard the voice of God. In a myriad of different ways and levels. This is not to say that every lunatic who thinks he or she hears voices has prophecy. When God speaks to you, no. You know, there's a thing they say about, you know, when the world is shaking and stuff is going on, it's that those who are talking don't know, and those who know aren't talking. The prophets didn't go around telling everybody, I'm a prophet, unless they had a message. When they had a message, there was a methodology in place, a halachic methodology. How do I know this is a prophet and not a lunatic? Because, by the way, sometimes receiving prophecy could mimic a form of mental illness or lunacy. Epilepsy is a profound example. Where people who are epileptic, some very famous people in non-Jewish faith systems who are known to be epileptic, who claim to be prophets. So when did God speak to a nation, any nation? Once. Matan Torah. And here David HaMelech is speaking about God fulfilling His word, the word that He spoke to Tzavarav. And Rashi says that means Kol ha'umais, all the nations. When was this such a thing? When did God speak to all the nations? It's like, when will God already fulfill the word that He spoke to all the nations? I'll ask you a better question. When did He speak to all the nations?
Does that mean necessarily directly?
I don't know. If it doesn't mean directly, what does it mean speak to?
Well, you can convey a message through somebody else rather than speak to them directly.
It says, Mavasreis, Yiten Oimer. Yiten Oimer. When did God speak to all the nations? He only spoke to our nation once. When did He speak to all the other nations? Was there multiple Matan Torahs that we weren't told about?
At the same time.
It must be at the same time. But we were there and they weren't. So what is going on here? What does this mean? Incidentally, there are numerous ways to frame this question. From the Riyaf to the Marsha. Some say the problem is Mevasres. If it was God speaking to us and we were supposed to pass the word on to the rest of the nations, if that's what it means, meaning that the Torah has a message not only for Jewish people. Incidentally, it doesn't have only a message for Jewish people. It has a message for all peoples. That's the 7 Noahide laws. We have a mitzvah to talk about God to everybody. Then why does it say mevasreis? Mevasreis or mevasrot means multiple messages. Multiple messaging. That was one message. That was hamevaser, when he told us. So when it comes to multiple, we ask, where was the multiple messages? But that's what David HaMelech says in the book of Tehillim. So Rabbi Yochanan, he expounded on this verse, and he explained. He says the meaning is, Kol dibur v'dibur sheyotza mipi hagvura. Every time God spoke, it doesn't say, by the way, 10 commandments. You know that. How do you say commandment in Hebrew? A mitzvah. You ever hear of Aseret HaMitzvot? No, because they don't exist. There are Sheva mitzvot, and that's for Bnei Noach, for all of humanity. Are people kind? And then there's Taryag mitzvahs. 613 mitzvahs. Who are they for? For the Jewish people kind. That's all. It doesn't go past that. There are no other groupings. You could say there's Ramach mitzvahs asay, 248 positive mitzvahs. You could say there are Shin Samachei Shasa, or 365 negative mitzvahs, 10 mitzvahs. There is no such grouping. Only in English it sounds good because Cecil B. DeMille made a movie out of it, or maybe because it was mistranslated in some version of the Bible, that non-Hebrew version of the Bible, where they translated as Seres HaDibra, it says as 10 commandments. It doesn't say commandments.
Simply the poverty of the language, that's all.
It's a simple ignorance, that's what it is. It's not only poverty of language, it's absolute ignorance, because everything can be translated, only sometimes it requires multiple words. Sometimes it requires phraseology instead of a single word. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't give you a right to mistranslate something. If there isn't a word in your language that translates something fully, then describe it. Then it's an experience. What we call in Hebrew, a chavaya. So describe your chavaya. Figure out the terminology, the words, the verbiage you're going to use. It's ridiculous, the 10 Commandments. Ridiculous. Anyway, going back to the subject here, what does it say? Aseres ha-dibrot. What are dibrot? It's not a commonly used word. What are dibrot? Well, let's stop for a minute and think. What is the root source of the word dibrot, which is plural, by the way?
It could be either thing, as in davar, or word, which is...
Yeah, davar is a thing, dibur is a spoken thing, and davar and dibur are really not separated from one another. They're kind of conjoined at the hip. That's a dibur and a davar is not so different.
Well, remotely.
Well, remotely different. A dover is the thing, and the dibur is when you spoke about it. It's like when you speak about something, so what were you speaking about? Something. So there was 10 things that were spoken about. In other words, God spoke to us 10 times. And there's 10 statements, with probably the best imperfect translation in English. 10 statements God made to us, 10 sentences.
Then it would be imrot rather than dibrot.
Well, the difference between amar and diber is not such a broad difference. It's a very subtle difference.
A word and phrase.
A word and phrase is not correct, because vayedaber or vayomer, which are both biblical Hebrew, don't really mean different things. So our sages tell us that the difference between vayedaber and vayomer is the tone of voice, or the attitude that's being conveyed. That dibur is always a lashon kosher. It comes across as harsh. It's aggressive talk, tough talk. And amira is softly spoken. But it doesn't really mean something intrinsically different. So Aseret HaDibrot there was some very powerful things God said to us. So if somebody would have walked in with Aseret HaDibrot and said, wow, that was intense. How many things did he tell us? Well, there's a lot of words. You look at the first Aseret HaDibrot, and they're very long. And the second Aseret HaDibrot, very short. It's not just instructions, because Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord God, Asher Hotziticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took you out of Egypt, is not really an instruction. What is the instruction? I am the Lord God, I took you out of Egypt. That's more like a statement. Lo Yilecha is an instruction. So some of the things God told us were direct instructions, like Lo Tisa Shem Hashav. That's pretty direct. Lo Tinaf. That's pretty direct. Don't take God's name in vain. Do not commit adultery. That's very direct. Like one guy once said, which part of thou shalt not did you not understand? And people say, I didn't know the Torah. I couldn't learn. I didn't understand it. It says Zacharat Yom Shabbat. But what didn't you understand about that? Did you understand that Shabbat has to be different than Friday and Sunday? Yeah, so if it's the same thing, if you're in the cottage on Friday, and you're in the cottage on Sunday, and you're in the Siddur on Sunday, and on Saturday, and on Friday, do you think maybe that's not called keeping Shabbos? I own the rabbi, I do the biblical stuff. I understand the biblical stuff. Okay, so how did you understand which part of Zachorat Yom HaShabbat sounded different? Please explain to me. And obviously, you can't reasonably explain the difference because it's ridiculous. It's very clear. So some of what God told us was statement-like, some of it was instruction-like. I have a sneaky suspicion that if you would have spoken to the Jewish people on the afternoon of Matan Torah, not everybody knew exactly what he said. And not everybody could repeat it back to you. It's a long speech, there's 620 words there. Not everybody could tell you back exactly what he said. I don't even know if they knew it was 10 things. They probably had to figure it out. The smart people, what we would call the chayzim, the Rebbe would finish the Farbrengen, then the team of really sharp guys would get together and they would review the Farbrengen, led by Rabbi Yelkan. The chayzim would sit there. I think everybody knew exactly what the Rebbe said. There's plenty of people. There was the experience of being there, elevated them, it lifted them. They heard whatever they heard. They hope it will be transcribed. They'll be able to learn it later. God spoke these words as the neshama left separated from the body. It was like unbelievable experiences. So when this all happened, how many things did God say in the end? How do we know where a thing begins and ends? It's not so easy. Not so hard when you look at the words. Any scholar could figure it out. It's okay, well, this is the beginning, this is the end. This is a thing, this is a thing. First Aseret Dibra has a lot of words and only 5 things. The second, a Dibrot, have few words. They still have 5 things. Right? Long statements, short statements. The point is that God spoke to us, and the people may not have known how many things it was, but God said it was a Seres HaDibros. Seres HaDibros, He gave us 10 things. He gave us 10 statements. And these 10 statements encapsulated the essence of Yiddishkeit. In fact, really, the Zohar says the first 2 statements already encapsulate the essence of Yiddishkeit. Anochi represents all positive mitzvahs. I am, therefore you should listen to me and do all these things. And lo yilecha, you shouldn't. You shouldn't rebel. You shouldn't do your own thing. You should do it. That's all so in the first 2 dibrot, the first 2 statements, which we heard from God Himself, that actually that took care of everything, right? So we have 613. The first 2 of them in statement form we heard from Moshe, and the next 611 we heard from God. And the next 611 we heard from Moshe, which is the meaning of Torah Tziv Lanu Moshe. Torah is the gematria, the numeric equivalent of 611. By the way, my son Levi figured out that Moshe Rabbeinu's name is mentioned 611 times in the 5 books of Moses. How incredible is that? It's like exactly what it's supposed to be. 611 times.
What happened to the other 2?
We heard from God. That's the point. Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Torah is the gematria of Taf Reish Yud Aleph, 611.
Yeah. What happened to the other 2?
We heard it from God. 2 we heard from God, 611 we heard through Moshe. So, returning to the subject at hand, trying to understand this verse of the book of Psalms, which is King David prophetically conveying something to us, but really, when we figure out this verse from the book of Psalms, we'll know more than just what a particular verse in the book of Psalms is saying to us. We'll know more about Matan Torah. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan taught that what happened was that every dibur,